Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch in the WWE Network. For the entire road to WrestleMania, I'll be reviewing every installment of WrestleMania from 1 to 30, with the exception of 17, 19, 21, and 20, which are already here on the channel in the WrestleRant series. Go back to last spring to check those out. But in the meantime and in between time, though, today is all about WrestleMania 2. So on the whole, I thought this was a good show. Not as great. It wasn't like great. It was historic. That's what I would sum it up as. 2 was also historic in that it was the first and only WrestleMania to take place from 3 different places simultaneously. They had the first 4 matches in Long Island and New York, the second set of matches in Chicago, and the third set of matches in Los Angeles. So the first time, the only time, and probably the last time that will ever be done. So they made history in doing that, and they wanted to experiment a little bit more after the first ever WrestleMania was was such a huge success. And like I said, it wasn't a bad show. It had some good matches on it. But sandwiched in between the historic WrestleMania 1 and the iconic WrestleMania 3, this is one I would, suggest you miss. But, don't go away just yet. I'll be reviewing it so you can determine it for yourself. From the from the Long Island portion in New York, kicking off the show, Paul Orndorff and the magnificent Muraco fighting to a double countout. Only a 4-minute match. Again, nothing too special like they talked about in my WrestleMania 1 review. A lot of these matches were pretty throwaway. They're quick squash matches that didn't mean anything. They just put them on the card to have a wrestling card. A lot of these matches didn't really have any stories behind them. So there's really not much to say about most of them. But the second match there is the WrestleMania debut of Macho Man Randy Savage, defending his Intercontinental Championship with Miss Elizabeth in his corner against the Animal, George Steele. So, of course, George the Animal Steele, I'm sorry, not the Animal George Steele. This isn't Batista here. I remember reading about this rivalry in George's book, the Animal's book, that he put out a couple of years ago. I read this back in 2013, and he mentioned how in the book, how he had such great and a lot of chemistry with Macho Man, as well as Elizabeth, too. Because the whole thing was that George, Steele, whatever, was going after Elizabeth at ringside. He would always be distracted by her, allowing the Randy Savage to pick up the scraps and whatever else and kind of, take advantage of George Steele, who's kind of like a mentally handicapped character. And that would also kind of tie into the following year in Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Savage. Of course, everyone remembers that great match. I'll talk about that on Tuesday, whenever you WrestleMania 3. But let's not forget, George Steele was in the corner of Ricky Steamboat for that matchup, which is something that gets overlooked more often than not. But that kind of tied in from this match when he went for the Intercontinental Championship, of course, coming up short. Randy Savage successfully defending his Intercontinental Championship on this show. But it was historic, too. It was a WrestleMania debut of Macho Man and Randy Savage. It would go on to compete at every WrestleMania. 3 would face Ricky Steamboat, 4 winning the WWF title, facing Hulk Hogan for that championship at WrestleMania 5. WrestleMania 6, I believe, facing Piper? I forgot what match he had at WrestleMania 6. But WrestleMania 7 facing The Ultimate Warrior, WrestleMania 8, or maybe that was WrestleMania 8, shit, I can't remember exactly. But nevertheless, you get my point. He did commentary WrestleMania 9, which I just watched yesterday as I'm filming this. But still, this matchup would kick off the Macho Man era of WrestleMania, his debut match at WrestleMania, so it was a historic match in that sense. Up next, Jake Roberts versus George Wells. Quick showcase match for the Snake. Jake the Snake, he goes over in 3 minutes. Good win for him. I think he was feuding with someone else on this show. May not have been this year. It may have been another WrestleMania where I know him and maybe it was Paul Orndorff. I can't remember exactly who it was. And they were in separate matches on like the same show. And I don't know why they wouldn't just have them go one-on-one. It was weird. Like I said, I don't even know if it was this WrestleMania. Maybe it was another one. But, a nice showcase match with Jake the Snake. Up next, Mr. T taking on Roddy Piper in a boxing match and kind of once again tying in from WrestleMania from the prior year when Mr. T and Roddy Piper were on opposite sides of the ring in that iconic tag team match with Hogan and Mr. T taking on Orndorff and Roddy Piper. So the match itself ended via disqualification after Piper, I think, either punched or he body slammed. That's what it was. He body slammed Mr. T to get himself disqualified. So it felt like they wasted a lot of time. I mean, it got 13 minutes. It got, it deserved the time that it got, 13 minutes, and it maybe even could have gone longer with a clean finish. And I understand they wanted to protect Piper. Maybe Piper didn't want to lose clean to a celebrity. And I guess in retrospect that makes sense, but don't give it as much time as it did if it's only going to end in a DQ. I mean, Mr. T ended up, he was the last man standing in the end. He got his comeuppance over Roddy Piper, but still though, to give it as much time as it did, to go as many rounds as they did, only to have it end in disqualification was a bit anticlimactic. But still, though, it was nice to have a few that kind of tied in from the previous WrestleMania. And, of course, anyone who knows Roddy Piper knows that he had a legitimate issue with Mr. T for the longest time in real life. So that would kind of play off on TV very, very well, and especially in this matchup with a lot of hard shots from both guys. But historic matchup there. Up next to our second portion of the matches from Chicago, opening it up for the Women's Championship. Fabulous Moolah retaining that title against Velvet McIntyre. The match only went a minute, especially, I mean, it was no women's match from the year before when Wendy Richter emerged victorious with the championship and got a big moment. Fabulous Moolah would win back that championship shortly thereafterwards, and Wendy Richter would not get a rematch on the show. That's probably what should have happened, in my opinion anyway. It should have been Moolah versus Wendy Richter, but it wasn't. It was only a minute women's match. Moolah goes over after utilizing dirty tactics, so could have been more than what it was. They probably could have taken some time out of the tag team title match or something, but whatever. It was a minute matchup. Up next, we had Corporal Kirchner taking on Nikolai Volkoff in a flag match. Really don't know what the significance of that was. I mean, flag matches are usually hit or miss, not really usually my cup of tea. The match was fine, but it only went 2 minutes. So if you're going to have a gimmick match, at least give it a bit more time. So these first two matches on the Chicago portion were kind of rushed, which was weird. But we would get 9 minutes for the Battle Royal pitting WWF versus the NFL. And this is before we had, I think, WrestleMania 11 with Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event. This was all before that. But Andre the Giant winning his second WrestleMania match in a row after the previous year where he defeated Big John Studd in that the body slam challenge match where he won the $15,000. And Andre the Giant's, like I said before, his second consecutive win at WrestleMania. And this was more so a showcase for him than anything else. A lot of these guys were nobodies. But interestingly enough, to win that Battle Royal, the last person that he would eliminate would be Bret Hart. Would, of course, go on to be one of the biggest stars in WrestleMania history. Bret Hart making his WrestleMania debut on this show in this Battle Royal. But, it was pretty significant that Bret Hart, of course, in years to come would be involved in the tag team title matches and the WWE title matches and the main event of some WrestleManias. So it was cool to see Bret Hart in his early years, to see Andre also being showcased here in the dominant fashion that he was. So, didn't really mind this Battle Royal. And in fact, I kind of enjoyed it more so for just Andre because, like I said, a lot of these guys were just nobodies. But, it was a nice showcase for him and as well as the WrestleMania debut of Bret Hart. So pretty cool to see him before he became the Hitman. And up next, our final match on the Chicago portion for the WWF Tag Team titles. The British Bulldogs defeating the Dream Team for the WWF Tag Team titles. Good match. Got a lot of time, as much time as the boxing match did. At least they made the most of it. I'm a sucker for the British Bulldogs. I think both these guys, Davey Boy Smith as well as Dynamite Kid, should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know why they aren't already. But still, that they had Ozzy Osbourne and Lou Albano of all people. So Ozzy Osbourne making a special appearance at WrestleMania 2. So it was really cool to see him. And that kind of added the celebrity, that was kind of the celebrity taste for this show anyway, on this portion of WrestleMania. Because we would also have Lou Duva, I guess, in the main event for Mr. T versus Roddy Piper. I guess he was in the corner of Roddy Piper, and Joe Frazier, of course, the iconic Joe Frazier, the legendary Joe Frazier, in the corner of Mr. T for his matchup on the Long Island portion. So that was pretty cool. But like I said, I digress. Going back to the tag team title match, good match here. Anything that the British Bulldogs have ever been involved in, that I've watched anyway, has always been good, nothing short of solid. So this was a good matchup and making for another moment for the second consecutive WrestleMania where the tag team titles changed hands. So good stuff there, good way to wrap up the Chicago portion before taking it over to Los Angeles for our final set of matches. Ricky Steamboat taking on Hercules Hernandez. Nothing on the line, no championships, no gimmicks, yet I got 7 minutes. So this is what I was talking about before, in that maybe the women's title match or the flag match could have used a few more minutes to be more special and be more memorable. They kind of got buried after, underneath everything else that was on the show. Ricky Steamboat versus Hercules. I mean, it was a good matchup. Ricky Steamboat was such a great worker that, he can get the fans invested in whatever he was involved in. But if there really wasn't anything up for grabs, and I don't really see why it got 5 or 6 more minutes in the other two matches. A match for the women's title did. So I don't know. That was a bit the timing for some of these matches was a bit weird. But like I said, didn't mind it. A good matchup. Up next, Adrian Adonis taking on Uncle Elmer. A real throwaway matchup. I mean, thankfully it only went 3 minutes, but it was just more so random than anything else. Jimmy Hart in the corner of Adrian Adonis. Both very memorable characters, of course, in the annals of WWE history, but it just seemed very random. I mean, for my taste, I don't know. It just seemed very weird, especially to take place at this point in the show. To at least do it earlier on in the night or whatever on one of the other portions of WrestleMania. To have it this late in the card was a little bit weird. But, you could scrap that match altogether and then give more time to the women's title match. I apologize for I keep on going back to that, but I don't know, that was just kind of something that bothered me. But up next, though, we would have a tag team match, Terry Funk and Hoss Funk, with Jimmy Hart in their corner after being in the corner of Adrian Adonis for the previous matchup, defeating the team of Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana. Really, really good match. Got about 13 minutes, more so, the same amount of time than the other two prior main events or the other portions of WrestleMania. And even more time than the main event between Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy for the WWF title. So that was interesting. But a very solid tag team match, though. Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana were so over at this point in time in their careers that it gave the Funk brothers, a lot of heat when they eventually went over. So nice WrestleMania debut for Terry Funk and a solid tag team match on the whole right before the main event. So we get to the main event, a steel cage match, the first ever steel cage match in WrestleMania history between Hulk Hogan defending his title against King Kong Bundy with Rob Conrad as the special guest referee. So the match itself was nothing too special. I mean, like I said, Hogan was never the greatest worker, but it was a nice David versus Goliath feel to it. That was pretty much the story being told here. Could he beat King Kong Bundy? Could he walk out with this championship intact? King Kong Bundy's another guy. I think he's already in the Hall of Fame, but he's another very underrated talent in my opinion. Should be in the Hall of Fame if he isn't already. I think he is, but still, I'm a fan of King Kong Bundy's work. But, nice David versus Goliath story told here. Very simple, keeping it simple. The match didn't get too much time. Didn't need to. This was back in the days of the blue steel cage, so that kind of stuck out to me while watching this matchup. Like I said, not a great match, but it told the story. That was really all that mattered. Hulk Hogan came out victorious, still the WWF champion. So, on the whole, I thought this was a good WrestleMania. Just there was a lot of stuff stacked into it. I mean, I respect them for going to all these different places and going back and forth between Long Island and then Chicago and Los Angeles. It was historic, but thankfully there's a reason why they haven't done it since, because it's way too chaotic, and I think it got more time than some of the other WrestleManias early on anyway. Maybe it went a little over 3 hours. I can't remember exactly, because a lot of these, it definitely wasn't 4, but a lot of these WrestleManias were like 2.5 hours, and this was definitely on the 3-hour side. But it's not that like this was a bad WrestleMania. They just felt like they shoved a lot into it. They wanted to get everyone on the show. Some matches they could have done without. Like, I understand getting Jake Roberts on the show, but putting him in a 3-minute match against a guy that nobody knows was a bit ridiculous. But like I said, the main event was memorable between Hogan and Bundy for the WWF title. The Intercontinental title match, it was cool to see Randy Savage make his WrestleMania debut. Same thing with Bret Hart. Same thing with Terry Funk. So that was pretty cool. No new champions crowned except for the tag team championships, like I said before, a really good match, as well as the other tag team match between Funk and Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana on the Los Angeles portion. So, like I said at the start of the review, not a WrestleMania that you need to go back and watch. I think sandwiched in between WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 3 kind of hindered it, because WrestleMania 3 was so memorable for the Steamboat versus Savage match and the Hogan versus Andre match, and then WrestleMania 1 was just the first ever WrestleMania, so it's just historic, like I keep on saying over and over. But, in between those two WrestleManias, it's not a good fit. Not one that you need to go back and watch. But if you do intend to watch it, you will get some nice treats in between. A lot of it, most of it is really not all that memorable. Nothing, must-see. But there are some good matches mixed in between all this chaotic nature of it. But like I said before, they made history by going 3 different places. So there was that. But that is WrestleMania 2, upcoming this Tuesday. I'll be talking about WrestleMania 3 with, like I said before, my thoughts on Randy Savage, the epic match between Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat for the Intercontinental Championship, as well as one of the most memorable main events in WrestleMania history between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant for the WWF Championship. So stay tuned here on the channel until Tuesday for that. In the meantime and in between time, make sure to find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews, on Twitter at WrestleRant, and make sure to stay tuned for the entire road to WrestleMania right here on the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing and sharing as well for my review of every WrestleMania, like I said before, with the exception of 17, 19, 20, and 21, which you can check right back here on the channel from last spring. Once again, folks, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys on Tuesday.